Good morning. When God called me to give up my secular job so that I could work for him full-time in the ministry and live completely by faith, I was 26, and it meant I had to give up my flat and car and move in with a family who said they'd support me. And this might sound like everyone's dream, for God to call you to his service and live by faith with others providing for you. And at first it was wonderful because God had provided a practical solution for me. But in actual fact, it was the most humiliating experience I'd ever been through. You see, I'd had a fun and exciting job, earning a good salary, which meant I could afford to have my own flat and car. But these weren't difficult to give up when the call came. This was a sacrifice I gladly made. But what I did find difficult was losing my independence and knowing that every movement I made could be observed by others. What made matters worse was the fact that God had put me with a family who were themselves struggling financially. Every month when their rent was due, they'd have to work out how they were going to raise their money. Sometimes they'd need to sell some of their own possessions. I even gave jewellery and other items to be sold to raise funds. It was a stressful time for me because I felt I was an added burden, and I couldn't understand why God would put me in this situation. I remember sharing my feelings with my pastor as I was working closely with him, saying how horrible it was to be in this position, how humiliated I felt. He heard me out a couple of times, but then I think he'd had enough and just laid into me. He told me I was the most ungrateful person he'd ever come across. God had bent over backwards to provide for me so that I didn't need to worry about a roof over my head or food to eat. So why was I complaining? Yeah, but this family can't afford another mouth to feed as they're struggling financially themselves. Oh, he got really angry with me, saying, "These people have sacrificed willingly for God. How dare you rob them of their blessing and reward? You're the most ungrateful person I've ever known." That really stung. I hadn't realised I was such a proud person. We value ourselves so highly. I loved earning my own money and being able to give generously and buy nice presents because it made me feel good. I hated being dependent on other people. It was so humiliating. But that's exactly why God placed me in this situation. He had to humble me because God doesn't pity the flesh. That's the old man. In fact, that's what he's trying to crucify and annihilate. When God chose me, it's almost like he was scraping the barrel. I had so many character flaws and mood swings. That's why I'd moved into a flat and lived on my own. I couldn't possibly share with a friend because once they'd got to see the real me, I'd have lost a friend. I was rebellious, self-opinionated, brutally honest, and so self-righteous. In fact, I couldn't even stand me. This is one of my favourite scriptures in the Bible. It's from 1 Corinthians 1 verse 26. "For you see your calling, brethren, how that not many wise men after the flesh, not many mighty, not many noble are called. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to confound the things which are mighty. And base things of the world, and things which are despised has God chosen. Yeah, and things which are not, to bring to naught things that are, that no flesh should glory in his presence." Some artists comb the beaches searching for driftwood. When they do come across bits of wood, they're not bothered about what they look like. The thing that's of interest to them is the type of wood and whether it can be worked on when dried out. The outward appearance of the wood, its shape, the rough edges, these have no bearing on what the artist sees in his mind, because these disfigurements can all be chipped off and cleaned up. The artist will chip away that rough exterior until what he sees in his mind's eye can be seen by everyone else. In the same way, God doesn't give two hoots about our rough exterior either. In fact, the more disfigured and rough we are, the better. Because when he's worked on us and got the result he's after, then people will see what an incredible artist he is, and he'll get all the glory. It's what he can make of us that's important to God. Well, All I can say is that God must have exceptionally good foresight, because he certainly got a lump of rough wood when he chose me. My outward appearance was great. I had a good brain in my head. I looked good and dressed well. I sang professionally, could even play an instrument. But my character stank and needed major surgery. God was in me for sure, but he was trapped inside my proud, arrogant exterior, and he had no way to shine out of me. Some years ago, I had a vision and saw a beautiful Ming vase. This vase was greatly admired because, being so exquisitely made, it was extremely valuable. It was a showpiece. But I saw an angel hit the vase with a little toffee hammer, and it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Then I saw the angel laboriously glue together again all these little pieces until it stood once more as a complete vase. But now it was worthless because it was marred by all the cracks and it had no outward beauty. Then the angel poured a very expensive oil into the vase, and the fragrance of the oil filled the room. Now people no longer paid any attention to the cracked vase. Their focus had been captivated by the exquisite smell emanating from it. Our problem is not how to obtain the life of Christ, but how to allow this life to flow out from us. When we say we need the Lord to break us, it's not just a term we use. It's actually vital that he does break us, as his life is imprisoned by us. In Mark 14, verse 3, it says this: "And being in Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as Jesus sat at meat, there came a woman having an alabaster box of ointment of spikenard, very precious, and she broke the box and poured it on Jesus' head." Now, this actual alabaster box itself was a very costly item, with or without what it contained. But it was broken open because there was something even more precious inside, which couldn't be accessed or appreciated while the box remained intact. The actual spikenard was valued in those days at being worth 9 months' wages, but it was encased, imprisoned in the alabaster box. John 12, verse 3. "Then took Mary a pound of ointment of spikenard, very costly, and anointed the feet of Jesus, and wiped his feet with her hair. And the house was filled with the odour of the ointment." Now, in this second reading, not only did it mention the alabaster box being broken, but it said the whole house was filled with the odour of the ointment. The alabaster box contained very precious spikenard, which, spiritually speaking, is the Spirit of God. But if the box hadn't been broken, then the Spirit of God couldn't have been released. Our fleshly, earthly life, our old man, is a very precious gift from God, and we've all been given a free will concerning what we do with it. Each one of us has ambitions, dreams and hopes. It may be your ambition to become rich and famous. You may dream of becoming an astronaut or a computer programmer, or have some other fantastic career in mind. Maybe what you really hope for is a husband or wife, a house, children, and a loving, happy family. These things are all legitimate, but we all have to realise that these are our plans for our life and not necessarily God's plans. Why should we regard ourselves as being so precious if our outward man only contains the fragrance of God instead of releases it? Many times throughout our lives, the Lord places us in situations which are intended to break our outward man. But the moment his hand touches us, we feel unhappy, sometimes quarrelling with God because of the unpleasant circumstances, and becoming negative in our attitude. Whether we're conscious of it or not, the aim of the Lord is not only to break open our outward man, our fleshly, selfish man, but to completely destroy it. That's our old nature I'm talking about, not the physical flesh. Brokenness is the way of blessing, fragrance and fruitfulness. But it's also a path that's sprinkled with blood, sweat and tears from many wounds. In Romans 8 verse 13 we read this. For if you live after the flesh, you shall die. That's if you live after the old man, the old nature. But if you through the Spirit do mortify the deeds of the body, you shall live. The way of the cross, that's taking up the lifestyle that Jesus taught in the Sermon on the Mount. It splits open the outer hard shell. It must destroy our opinions, our ways, our cleverness, our self-love, our all. We mustn't cling to our weak, soulish characteristics, which still emanate the same flavour, even after 5 or 10 years of the Lord's dealing with us. That sharp tongue, the quick and rash disposition, critical and forceful nature, and particularly our love of self, this all has to be completely destroyed. Why is it that after many years of God trying to deal with them, some Christians still remain the same? They still have a forceful will, strong emotions and stubbornness, or still vacillate, break their word, or are fearful. We don't understand the process. We think we're just going through difficult circumstances, or the devil's having a go at us. We don't realise it's God. We must allow the Lord to forge a way into our lives. That's why Paul says, let this mind be in you, which was in Christ Jesus. It's something we have to allow, if we want to be like Christ. God can take us to where the water is, but we personally have to do something practical. We need to bend our head from its lofty position and drink. Once you start doing what Jesus says, rather than just listening to nice sermons or reading the Bible to fulfill your daily duty, you'll be amazed at the transformation of your outward man. Proverbs 3 verse 5 says this. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not unto your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct your paths. And the next 2 verses say, be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord and depart from evil. It shall be health to your navel and marrow to your bones. What a promise. David proved that because David wrote this, David proved that putting your complete trust in the Lord, rather than trying to sort problems and difficult circumstances out in your own strength, and acknowledging God rather than Satan in everything that happens to you, this gives God an opportunity to direct you into his perfect plan and will for your life. And when you start fearing the Lord and stop acting as though you know best, and stop responding to situations in hurtful and vicious ways, David says that adopting this attitude is actually health to your navel and marrow to your bones. Your actual health in body, mind and soul is restored. You know, we all value ourselves very highly. But the picture of ourselves that we have in our own mind is far different to the one others see. And it's certainly different to how God sees us. It's only when we stop fearing the pruning and start learning to embrace the personal attention God is giving us that we'll realise God is for us. God wants to completely destroy our old nature, but he's not out to destroy us. He's fashioning us. So God bless you.